Everyone, maayong gabi sa tanan from different places in the Philippines and also I think from the world. Welcome to tonight's talk. I'm Mark Seng and I'm the founder of Design Davao Society. So I'm gonna tell you the story of how this event almost didn't happen. On October 16, almost exactly 2 years ago, a small group of not so young dreamers in the construction industry organized Spam X Babble Talks Davao, a whole day series of lectures on the topic authenticity and agenda, steps to progress Philippine architecture. By God's grace, four of the most dynamic architects in the Philippines agreed to fly to Davao to be our speakers. They were Bak Sia from Cebu, Jason Buensalido, and AJ Javier of Manila, and Edwin Uy from Cagayan de Oro. At first, we booked a small lecture room at the New Malayan Colleges, Mindanao, a maximum seating capacity of around 150 people. With only a month before the event, we spread the word online and by word of mouth. But a week later, our registration was almost at 200 participants. We knew that we couldn't let this opportunity pass. So we took a leap of faith and booked the 700 capacity auditorium above the lecture room. On event day, almost 500 students, construction professionals, and design enthusiasts from all over Davao attended. Aside from our four speakers, the head of city planning, Mr. Ivan Cortez, and the vice mayor, Sebastian Duterte, also relayed their messages about Davao's rising development and the city's urban master plan. In realizing Spamex Bubble Talks Davao, one thing was clear to us. Davaoenos had a deep hunger to learn about how to build a better place for themselves and for others. After the event, we were so fired up and eager to do a bigger event on October 2020. But in March of last year, well, you know what happened. Like many of you, we had to scramble to secure our families and livelihood in the midst of an uncertain and ever-changing situation. A lot of things changed, except one thing: a vision of an authentic and sustainable built environment for Davao City with empowered and excellent Davao designers. And as a result, Design Davao Society was born during the pandemic. The research question of our canceled event was this: what is Davaoenyo design? And while our focus was on the built environment, we realized that expertise in materials and construction management techniques were not enough. There was a need to spark learning and collaboration between the creative arts, the sciences, and the humanities, because you have also been deeply exploring these questions in your own fields. Questions like, who is the Davaoenyo, especially now in this new normal? What can we learn from our past? How do we present ourselves in our artifacts, culture, and buildings? What are the qualities of Davao City that makes us unique in the world? And this is why we are honored to have these diverse and distinguished panelists with us tonight, and also all of you in this Zoom room and in the FB Live. Thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight. I hope and pray that as we interact with each other tonight, and for those who will be listening in the future to a recording of this talk, that we can join together in this never-ending journey of discovering ourselves as Davaoenos in order to keep and build a better society and a better city. So on behalf of the core team behind Design Davao Society, welcome to our fifth online talk, Genius Loci or LOCI, Seeking the Spirit of the City from Within. Maayong gabi sa tanan. I now turn you over to our very capable moderator, Ms. Nana Cabales.
Yeah, I'm the moderator and I'm the co-founder of Design Davao Society. I am a graduate and registered licensed architect, but I don't usually introduce myself now as an architect. I still do practice, but I fancily and proudly call myself designer storyteller because before being a designer, being an architect, I was first a storyteller. Beautiful graphics that you will be seeing for the entire talk is courtesy of the very, very talented Megan Palero, who is currently tuning from Netherlands. All right. Okay, so a little bit of background why we started Genius Loci as a talk was actually inspired from our last month's talk, which was entitled there, rekindle, recognizing the value of old downtowns. Okay, so from this talk was led or with our main speaker Christine Boycosi, a Davaoeña, but now currently residing and based in Singapore, talked about the morphology of Davao City. So, you know, by morphology, she tackled about the growth of the city. She tackled about from a very small street to a very huge metropolitan, not yet a grown metropolitan, but you know, the city that we have today. And as we went along with the reaction segment from Paul Corpus, who is the founder of Davao of the past, we looked at the historic value of our city through photographs. And then from other reactors as well, we started talking about the plan, how we could plan for a better future. And then the concluding reaction was from AJ Javier, who is an architect based in Manila, na mentioned ni Mark kanina, talked about mainly he told us that the best thing that Davao City can learn is to not repeat the mistakes that Manila did in terms of urban planning and so on and so forth. And he gave us some very key points in terms of how to um, activate our placemaking in Davao City. But the best thing that he said during that night was to find the champions of your city. Not just the best architects or planners, but your design champions, your creative champions, your educator champions, your talents. Because those people will help you find the soul of your city. And he's expounded it and introduced to us this beautiful term, genius loci, that we are talking about right now. So genius loci, again, if you Google it, these are the definitions that you will see. First, it's a presiding god or the protective spirit of that place. So if you research it in the architectural perspective of it, it is much more heard of in the Southeast Asian architecture, wherein I don't know, we Oriental people, especially in the Southern Asian portion of the world, we really love spirits. No, like we really have mga bathala, mga basta we have spirits. We like it. We worship the. If you go to Japan, there are a lot of stories signifying this and like that. And if you study the modern architecture of Hong Kong and in Singapore and other Chinese cities, they still not just feng shui, but they still respect the belief of the existing spirits of their place. Now, in a more uh, lesser metaphysics or lesser mystic approach, a lot of people identify the spirit of a place or the genius loci as the prevailing character of a certain city, a certain building, or a certain place. In other words, that distinct atmosphere of the place. No? So, meaning, remember lang when you, sometimes kasi we don't notice this within our hometown. That's just a sad thing. Maybe later Professor Hodge will expound on this as a social professor, no? But just picture for a bit, no? I'm talking to you, the audience, and to our FB Live listeners. The last time you traveled to a certain city outside of the Philippines or outside your home city, what distinct atmosphere did you feel? Did you feel? Like, what was the prevailing character that you noticed? Now, it's either positive, very negative, or very neutral, or very meh. Because that meh feeling is still that prevailing character. And this is naman, uh, can be very subjective, as you imagine it, as you recall, as you remember it. But what is very interesting about the genius loci, or the prevailing character or distinct atmosphere of the city, is actually a very collective uh, thing na parang you will realize later na kung ano yung na-feel mo sa city na yan, ano yung description mo sa city na yan, you will realize later on that, oh, it's not only you who felt that. A lot of people who went to the same place feels that. Another example would be, when people talk about Paris as the city of romance, the city of love. I've never been to Paris, so I cannot say. But it's not. It goes beyond their own marketing or tourism, because it's really what the people feels, what the collective feels when they are there, right? And then the moment I bet, the moment I mentioned Paris, city of love, you immediately pictured the Eiffel Tower and all the prenups na doon, right? So that's what we are trying to talk here. And then let's move forward a bit, no? To all our Davao City audience, to the people, to the beautiful people, to the Davaoenos, okay, whether they are still in the city or outside in the world, wherever in the world, this is something that I'm really glad and proud about the city's initiative and how we branded our city as Davao Life is here. And I'm showing to you this because, this is something that our city tourism, our government is promoting. And I felt that this is in fact in its essence true. However, I want to challenge in a way, do we really understand what we mean by life is here? What is that life anyway? Right? I think it goes beyond the durian, it goes beyond the flowers. Life is here. So my very little ambag or contribution for this one is, I really think it's about the people eh. It's us. And I'm not saying the purely, the Bawenyo, born and raised, yung mga apelido Lizada, mga ganon. I don't think so. Kasi a lot of our thriving Davaoenos are in fact not from Davao. It's amazing because I myself very in love with Davao City, but I'm not born here. I wasn't born here, no? And I chose to be here because there is really something about this place. And as a designer, as a storyteller, I wanna expound on this. And whatever that thing that I saw, I'm still trying to understand that magical feeling thing. I want to also share it with other people. And I'm so happy now we have thinkers here too to humanize that philosophical thing that I tried to say. So as what Mark saying mentioned kanina during his introduction when he introduced who designed Davao society is, this is our dream. This is our mission. This is no, no this is our vision. No, our vision is to help build sustainable Davao City, and what we mean by sustainable Davao City is it's a progressive city, meaning it provides lifelong solutions. We're sick and tired with quick fixes, so we want a progressive city, and then we want a city that is abundant, a city that will take care for the needs of its people more than just the bare minimum. No? And lastly, and I think this is very important, a city that is genuine, that roots and breeds genuine happiness. So that means a very high quality of life with people. Because I think that is what really Davao life is here about. You cannot say life is here if people here aren't happy. So that's my little hypothesis, kumbaga. So we will find out later na in connection with our genius loci and our present definition of who we are today, who we are as a collective, as a city, kung tugma ba, no? This is our attempt in our posters that we shared with you on public before this talk. We said that this is our attempt to understand the real identity, or what is the trying identity, what is the character of Davao City, by looking at our history, the stories in the past, and how is it affecting us today, and at the same time look at it in the eyes of our creative champions who are our guests today, which I will be introducing in a bit. There. So, in order for us to achieve that sustainable Davao City, again, this is our hypothesis that we must first do these things before anything else. We have to go back to our roots. Really have to understand not just as Davaoenos, but even the neighboring cities in later portion and as a whole country. Hopefully, no? It's a holistic knowing or going back to our roots. And then know and understand the stories of the past. Take note, know and understand two different things. And then think critically. Parang galit ako doon bigla. But also be more empathetic, no? And then ask the difficult questions. I think before we can do anything substantial and progressive and lifelong, we need to really go out and find out and ask the difficult questions first. And that is what we are here. We are going to ask each other difficult questions. And we are here to tell each other the stories from the past. Okay, so let me move on to introducing our beautiful speakers. First, we have Professor Haji Balehadia. Professor Haj is currently on her ongoing internship for to finish or to have her PhD in social organizational um, psychology, sir, no? Social and organizational psychology, PhD from Suleiman University. It's an ongoing, I believe, remote, and she earned both her bachelor's in arts and master's of science in psychology in Ateneo de Davao University, where she is also a professor, an assistant professor in the psychology department. And then we have Noy Noy Narciso, a multidisciplinary artist, educator, and a cultural mapper. He was also my past professor in Ateneo. They called it Pa Humanities 1, but today it's called Arts Appreciation. Another former faculty, another educator rather, but a former faculty from University of Mindanao, Fine Arts Division. Right now, he is the founder and the owner of the Sining Mata, an art gallery and music school in Tagum City that he established in 2006. And now he is also the resident artist of Tagum City Historical and Cultural Center. There. And then next we have Yun. We have Mandy or Amanda Fechivaraya. She's an artist teacher, a curator, and that you see her there. That's her website. Go check it out. She has lovely works. And very interesting about Mandy is she's a very unapologetic woman and a very fierce painter who believes, and I quote, that painting is like parenting. Some strokes must be gentle and some must be strong and bold, and it's a balancing act, as she would say. And we would love to hear more about this later, but she also specializes in uh, art as a art therapy. And yeah, she will hopefully share more with us later in relation to our topic. And then we have our a dear friend of mine, an urban planner and in innovation strategies. Mikey and I met few years back, maybe 3 or almost 4 years ago, when he visited Davao City for work and then stayed a longer time. He graduated from AIM for his master's in strategy and management. Tama, Mikey, no? I hope I wasn't wrong. And my very personal introduction for Mikey is at that time that we first met, we were both 25 years old. And what does that mean? We were both suffering immensely from our quarter life crisis. And I think that's why we became close. And till to this day, kahit bumalik na siya sa Luzon, we're still talking. And yeah, spoiler alert, we're still having emotional and tawag niyan, existential crisis until today. Last but not least, Senor Rene Lizada. It's so hard to introduce this person kasi ano paano ba he is now a sought after resource and motivational speaker, a very active member of Toastmasters. In fact, represented the Philippines in the World Championship of public speaking in the United States. He and his wife founded a training consultancy called the Lighthouse Five, and he is a writer and educator. He is the bluest of all the Blue Knights, an Athenian from grade school to graduate school. And one last note, Aya Mark, can you please share the link for our Jamboard on our chat box on Zoom? And then this sketch noting via Jamboard is our invitation to our audience to jot down your notes with us. This is anonymous. We will not see who are you, and we will just see what you are noting or sketching. So we wanted to introduce this concept as a way for our audience to engage more with us. So whatever you hear later during the introduction, the discussion, you may freely note them, either words or sketching. So let's start with Mikey.
Hi everyone. Thanks for having me here. So very briefly, by profession, yeah, I'm an urban planner, but I don't carry that with me every moment of living. So most of the time, what I do, I really just walk around the city, tapos read books. Really, what fascinates me about the city is there's a lot of things to take a look at to and be awed about. So most of the time for me, my 30 seconds introduction is I watch different sites of the city, even people. So yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Wow, exactly. 30 seconds. Okay, reset, and let's start next with Professor Haj.
Hello, hi, I'm Haji. I'm a sunrise vampire. I love sunrise. I take photographs of every sunrise that I get because I actually wake up very late. So each time that I get to have a chance to take photographs of sunrise, it's extraordinarily special. And I love walking around the city. I love walking. Yeah, it keeps my weight manageable.
Wow, thank you. Okay, another 30 seconds intro from Victor. Victor Domingue, sir, can you hear us?
Okay.
Go,
Okay na,
sir.
okay na? Okay.
Go,
So
Vic, go.
okay, I'm Victor from Tagum City. So I'm a former educator, and for now, I teach the local artists here in Tagum, and also I'm guiding the one of the tribes here in Tagum, and resident artist in here in historical Tagum City Historical Center. So I love creating design in our community, as
Thank you.
resident artist. Thank you.
Okay, restart. 30 seconds. Mandy, go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
Good evening, everybody, once again. Hi, I'm from Davao City also, and I'm an artist teacher educator who loves to help unpack the emotional baggages of my students. So I help them find the key in their luggage. I help them twist the lock and then finally open the zipper. And voila, all the skeletons are there, and we assemble them and find out that, oh, these are beautiful people pala inside your luggage.
And then Noy Narciso, who is currently in Santo Tomas right now. Go, sir.
I am Nonoy Narciso. I grew up in Mandog, Davao City. So I walk, run, bike, paint, draw, dance in all the streets in Davao City. In between, I was able to witness the changing landscape of Davao City. Sometimes lost, somehow found, but always at home.
Wow.
Texture and rhythm.
Uh, I nako, I can't believe I'm gonna say this, but achuk mandug.
Yes.
Last but not least, Senora Nelizada, 30 seconds.
Thank you, Nana. Good evening, everyone. Ako yata ang pinakabata dito, no? So, according to age yata ito, no? Parang according to age ang tawag dito. My name is Rene Lizada. I'm a sixth generation descendant of the old families in Davao. That means that my great-grandparents were together on that ship that came to Davao. I like hopya. And I like to watch movies. I sleep late. And right now, we're in the middle of hometown cha-cha-cha. So tonight, I have to stop. I have to delay the watching because of this thing tonight.
So Mikey, the prompt for you here is, as someone who, grew up in Manila, studied in Manila, and I remember you also live and you have a lineage in Ilonggo, right? Tama ba? In
Yeah,
Bacolod, is that correct?
yeah,
So,
Bacolod.
I think you are also, in a way, considered a third culture kid. And then, for your work, you travel around. And fun fact about Mikey, he reached that mabuhay miles in in one of our airlines. Wala man good bayad, so di na nato i-mention. Because he traveled from Manila to Mindanao 40 times. More than 40 times. So the prompt for you, Mikey, the question for you is, how, as a person who is not exactly a Davaoenyo, not here for a very long, like most of the speakers are, can you tell us what you think is the character of the city? That is a very direct question, for you. As someone, as much as possible, not as a planner, but a person who has a very strong background in humanities studies as well. Also, Mikey is a good communicator, and Rene, so when I lose my shiz later, they can take over. Mikey, go.
So, yeah, Davao is really interesting, no? When I first went to Davao, actually Davao has been home to me for more than 2 years because of work. And I've been moving around a lot. Pero one of the things that really struck me when I first went to Davao is I found that people in Davao had so much time on their hands. Someone living in Metro Manila, in contrast to living in Davao for work, surprised me na how much time you guys have over there. So just to describe to you, because I think the best way for me to describe Davao is to have a contrast. Where I live, what are my experiences. So in Manila, for example, all of us work. We finish working siguro around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, no? But in Manila, life starts at 9 p.m. pa. So for us, after 6, it's so traffic that we have to start having dinner 8, 9 p.m., then ride and commute. So we'll be home by 11. And that's the only time you have time for yourself, no? 11 o'clock. So when I first came to Davao, stayed there. So the office got me an apartment for a while. Um, nagulat ako na yung office ko kasi is in uh, Santo malapit sa Victoria Mall sa
Obrero?
Obrero. Yeah. Sa Obrero ako nagstay for 2 years. And yung office namin is just a 5-minute walk. So
The
first time
mystic
ko
Obrero.
makaranas yun. Walking for 5 minutes lang, you're in the office. So after 5 o'clock, I was shocked na there's so much time. Parang bigla ako nagkaroon ng 7 hours of leisure while in Davao. I think in those times that I used those 7 hours, I really walked a lot. So mahilig talaga ako mag-walk. So naikot ko actually yung buong Obrero by foot, but I still get lost. No, medyo weird yung
That's
pero
why Obrero is mystic.
Yeah, I find Obrero really interesting, no? Lots of good barbecue places dyan sa street na yan. And well, for work, no, we were going around a lot sa Davao. I find Obrero as one of the most interesting streets in Davao. I don't know if you feel the same. Baka bias ako kasi I live there. But it's a street where I found na it's currently progressing pa lang, but it has not lost touch sa mga houses converting to stores. So I got to talk to some store owners doon sa Obrero, bebenta ng mga chicken paggabi, mga nag-iihaw ng tuna sa streets. That's something super unique, no, for us Manileños. So hindi yan usual, but we get really excited when we are in proximity of those. Also, what I found really interesting, I guess not interesting for you guys so much na, is yung Torres Street. I always wondered, no, ano ba nga talaga yung Torres Street? Why is it becoming yung parang tambayan paggabi? Did it used to be a tambayan place exactly, or ano na lang ba siya? It was ano ba to? Parang nakikita ko maraming coffee shops doon. So I spent a lot of time there. So green coffee, naikot ko siguro 5 green coffee sa Davao. What else? What interested me? Honestly, na-shock ako sa Davao in the sense that nagulat ako people didn't walk as much, to be blunt. I found that very surprising because I found Davao very walkable. When we were having lunch, nagta-taxi kami for a 3-minute ride. I find that really odd. so Manila kasi taxi is so expensive, sobrang traffic So to ride a taxi to get from one end of the street to the other was alien to me. But I found it na parang habit niya siya dyan sa Davao, which is very interesting. But I really found it walkable naman yung streets niya. So sabi nila kasi yung heat niya daw sa Davao was something, mas mainit daw dyan sa Davao compared sa Manila. Well, totoo naman, lagi akong sunburn pag dyan ako sa Davao. Also, yung streets that I find interesting is yung area near Bangkerohan. I really enjoyed Bangkerohan. I found it very unique. And I found out na yung mga taga Bangkerohan are not from there, but from Marawi. Maraming items coming from Marawi. So, odd lang na in front of a 5-star hotel, you would have that kind of development. Tapos in front of a 5-star hotel, biglang kanto style development. Parang wow, what contrast that was. And I found it fascinating that foreigners loves the idea of Rojas Night Market. So Rojas Night Market, siguro para sa inyo taga Davao or for you Davaoenos, normal life na siya kasi it's been there for so long. Pero for us, it's like mixing provincial life with your modern development. Parang it has not lost in touch with its people. That's what I found fascinating about it. Na the real Davaoenos that you're looking for na talagang cooking your cuisine or yung narinig mo hardcore Bisaya mag-usap. Kasi I found it surprising, no? Pag sa mga mall, mix Bisaya English na yung language. Pero hardcore Bisaya, yung Bisaya that I don't understand well anymore. Because I can understand kasabot ko sang gamay sa Bisaya, pero not too deep. Pero pag nandun sa Bangkalan, parang I don't know, yung vibe lang, or when people talk, you hear them aloud. And then, nagulat ako may massage place kayo sa street. Well, that's interesting. Ay, ito pa, super interesting thing that I experienced first hand in Davao. Hindi kayo Spanish influenced. I was so surprised. It was uncommon for me to know a city, to get to know a city na hindi influenced by Spanish. Siguro yung church nyo, it is. But in the sense na yung city was devoid of yung mga old Manila vibe. So talagang nagulat ako because usually probinsya for us Manileños, talagang Spanish-oriented town. But what I found fascinating, ang dami yung cultures dyan. So first, nagulat ako sa arcades nyo, which is 1920s, 1930s pa pala binild, downtown San Pedro Street. That was really fascinating. Na I didn't know if you guys noticed may urban atriums kayo in between those buildings. So parang sayang, those can be urban atrium gardens that can be converted to a lot of things. And I think yun yung ano ba to, appeal. There's so much appeal in that part of town na I see na used to have that sort of appeal for the locals doon, no? Na meron kayong areas doon. Urban atrium, that's such a unique concept here. What else? Yung I was surprised na heavily influenced in Japanese. There's a Japanese village near UP. So nakita namin yung Japanese cemetery. Tapos nagulat kami, there's a lot of Japanese then who visits those parts. And then Chinatown, I was surprised nung sinabi sa akin na you have the largest Chinatown in the country. So wow, parang but hindi namin nalalaman yun nito. Tapos I met some professors in Ateneo and I was surprised yung history books niya is different from ours here from Manila. The history books that you're reading, the history books that we have been reading here in Manila was Tagalog history. And I was surprised na, we call it Hesica or we call it Filipino history, pero bakit Tagalog history lang inaaral namin? So when I found out about books about yung mga binabasa niyo sa Davao, I was surprised, okay, may ganito palang version of Filipino history that hasn't really gone through us or haven't reached us yet. That's me.
Thank you,
Telling a
Mikey.
personal experience about Davao. So yeah, that's my personal.
Thank you for that. And just to add lang a bit, no. Yeah, that's true. Wala masyadong hints of Spanish colonization in terms of architecture. Even the churches that you see here are, of course, there's an influence, pero not as how you see in Bohol or in Manila, right? But the based on the little thing that I know about the history of Davao is when it started as a very simple street. When the Obos came from the river and looked for the place beyond the higher ground, and that's really what the etymology of Davao means, the place beyond the higher ground. And what retained, though, in the forming later on of that small, long, the narrow but very long streets into four parallel long streets that is now what we know San Pedro, Magallanes, and Claveria, and so on and so forth, was actually influenced by the Spanish poblacion. That way of planning a city, the poblacion, where the church is in the center, the civic buildings are in the center. That I think is the strongest, I may be wrong, Spanish influence in terms of planning, pero hindi mo yun nakikita like how potent a building is. That's why I'm gonna be asking our next reactor.
Nanay, can I throw in a
Yes.
question before I end?
Go.
Sige. Question lang, I guess sana masagot ng other speakers and people in the audience. So there's a quote that I've been living by na you are on how you use your leisure time. That's how you are. You are when you are on how you use your leisure time. So siguro yung question ko for the rest of the guests and our co-panel members. So how does the Dabawenyo use your leisure time? And you having
that's
so
nice.
much leisure time there. So how do you use?
Thank you for that, Mikey. Sa audience natin na nag-sketch noting right now, you may answer that question there. Kasi anonymous naman eh. Diba? How do you use your leisure time? And because, as Mikey said, we define, ourselves are defined by how we use our time. Correct ba, Mikey? No? So, maybe we can ask our reactors to share their insights as well, or if anyone can build upon what Mikey just shared with us. Say, I wanted to move to Sir Noy. I actually really wanted not to hear Rene speak kasi Mikey already touched so many T's of the stories in the past, which Rene can share more, but he told me na he wanted to listen to everyone first before he humanizes things with the stories. Is that okay, sir, Rene? Do you want to let everybody finish first before you give your stories?
It's
Or
up
you
to
want to add something na?
If I add something, I'll end up talking.
Okay.
So,
Sige.
Mikey, the only thing I can tell you, Mikey, is taga Davao ka because pati din ako nawawala sa obrero. So, matagal na ako dito, so nawawala pa rin ako sa obrero.
Sige, balikan natin yun mamaya. Kasi nung shinare mo yung obrero, Mikey, nawala lahat yung mga prompts ko eh. Kasi I wanted to ask, bakit nga ba tayo nawawala sa obrero? And I think yun yung pangbunyag ng spirit of Davao City sa iyo, Mikey. That na pure Davaoenyo ka na ngayon kasi nawala ka na sa obrero. Okay, so may I invite now Noy Narciso, Professor Noy. I wanted you to talk next kasi last time we talked about, pinadescribe ko sa'yo, ano ba yung cultural mapper, di ba, sir? Like, I was so curious about it. What is a cultural mapper? What does that mean? And then, as we talk, ang dami kong surprises na narinig na, oh, okay, ganyan pala, the appropriation and the misappropriation of our culture. And why am I talking about this and why do I want you to talk about this? Because Davao City actually has 11 tribes, correct, sir? Correct, Noy? 11
Yan yun
ba?
sa
Or 12 or more?
newly perspective ng politics no, ng office ng tourism or ng Davao City na yung as a melting pot, but anthropological perspective hindi po yan yung sa present na yeah, as a
This
melting
is
pot
what
na
I'm
sa city.
telling you about, the surprises after surprises. Pumanda kayo mamaya kay Professor Hatchpa.
And it's growing they're adding more.
No, so this is basically the point of Design Davao Society, to educate our people, our community, to really learn the culture and the historical truths of our city. So, Sir Noy, my prompt for you is going back to, sticking the soul, the spirit of the city. How do you relate this identity that we have now in the city? I posted to my audience, to everyone kanina, the slogan of our city, the brand of our city, Davao, life is here. How do you relate that from a cultural mapper's perspective na not only studied it, but also really experienced?
Well, Davao City, it's a melting pot. It's a plural, no? It's a subcultures, maraming kultura. So you cannot pinpoint one, no? One can evolve, no? An Ilocano blood becoming a Davaoenyo, a Bisaya, an Ilonggo into. So I think ang napansin ko lang, if you're from Davao City, anybody can shift anytime in terms of
Like me, a
language.
Davaoenyo.
Yeah, I noticed that. Mo Tagalog na siya, mura na siya taga Manila, no? Pag Ilonggo na yun na. Pag magmoro siya, magmaranaw siya. Pero not all, no? Kay eventually as I observe, no, na as in my perspective, nituoy ko sa perspective na culture is dynamic. So now, the cultural mapping is very important in the project of the NCCA because there are so many things that are lost along the due to the development, selling of the land. Then with this changing landscape, everybody's coping with the changes. So for those who have no capacity to conserve or preserve, eventually change the landscape. Literally the house converted into this. So there are, well, good for some families and with institutions that they were able to preserve these structures. But this is one important thing for Davao City is becoming as a metropolitan, and in this changing landscape, it's important for us to establish, the important markers in Davao City. Even if they're gone, at least we have the documentation, pictures, objects, especially the intangible, the stories. So that is why I was interested in cultural mapping, because even as artists, even designers, with their excessive creativity and the power to influence people, are also unconsciously changing. But on the other hand, if you look at the perspective of dynamic culture, nobody can stop that. Nobody can, and there will be no impediments or obstacle to stop a new artist, a new designer, designing a new place. However, as a practitioner, also as a art practitioner, I realize that there are things that we still have a living tradition in Davao City. Or not just Davao City, Mindanao and other areas, not just Davao City. Take note, it's a living tradition. You don't need to go to books, to read books, to go to other. For a few minutes, you can have the Boolanon community, the Ilocano community, the Ilonggo, and uh, 1 hour, 30 minutes, then you already have the Bagobos
The
and the Marala.
believe.
Yes, but that's 1 hour southern area, no? So sabi ko, why not involve myself in this cultural mapping? But it's difficult because you have to be objective, an artist somehow, no? Even based on research, when they appropriate, it will be a responsible, appropriating or borrowing. So they should be based on research or immersion, dialogue, and consultation with the elders. So that is why I am interested in cultural mapping, because even I still learning. Recently, I was involved in cultural mapping with some areas in Mindanao, in Kapalong, and I would like to share this to everybody that it's ironic, because sorry for the LGU if I mention it, but I was so sad because there is 100 years Nara. Then the city was named after it, and here comes it's a Republic Act. What is this? This cultural mapping. Then we have the landmark, a cultural heritage. But another agency would tell us that we have to cut it off because it's unsafe for the community.
The
So
Nara was hailed as a national landmark, sir.
somehow it is now marked as a, because of it's 100 years. It was able to witness for the changing landscape of that area. So I tried to talk to some of the officials. Then, well, because I'm just a facilitator, so they fight also. But along the way, so the agency won. So they have to cut it off because there's already a hollow part of the tree. But as in an artistic point of view, I think we can save this by putting up structures, metals, that in case if it will fall, then it can support. But probably there are people also, construction is also objective and time based. So if a certain agency would say, "Oh, you build the road, cut it off," then if it obstructs the project of the government, national government, you cut it off. So that's ironic. So, yeah. So that is why even in our arts appreciation, we incorporated the importance of the intangible, tangible art or cultural mapping. Um, then, though majority of the LGUs are already applying for the cultural mapping projects or cultural heritage preservation and so on and so forth. But there are still um, LGUs or municipalities or towns that have not yet um, applied, no, for these cultural mapping heritage projects or documentation.
So parang, in other words, sir, no, I'm commenting from the last part na medyo kulang pa. We can do so much more pa, in other words,
Yes,
in
yes,
terms of
yes. Kasi
involvement.
because they're not yet translated into books, not yet integrated to some materials in the local. So they already have the published book approved by experts and from the offices of the NCCA. They are there in the municipality, but not yet. Not all, not 100%, because some are newly discovered, newly documented artifacts and stories and pictures and documents. And even to the extent I was able to witness a ritual that is not open to everybody. So they still you have to ask permission from the elders if you're allowed. So there's still this mystic, the spirit is still there. I was able to witness that. We got lost and yung tayo ang buhok mo sa likod, no? So that's the effect.
Amazing, amazing. So that's the spirit of the city that we kept mentioning for the last hour is something na you even felt in a creepy way, right? Being immersed to this still very rich culture. I just wanted to highlight that sharing from you, Sir Ba, katong when you mentioned na for me we are actually very lucky that we don't need to go to a library to experience and to learn about the culture, but just a few hours drive and not just drive gani. I mean, around the downtown there are still hints of this precious and precious culture and wow. So again, no, as I have mentioned when during my contextualization at the start, I said that one of the things that we should be doing is to really ask the difficult questions. And this might sound very provocative, but I will ask you, sir. I will ask Noy, and I will ask the rest of the speakers, and you will have the time to answer this later in your own reaction time. And also to the audience, I'm going to be asking this. How do you think can we make our community, not just the people, but including our planners, our policymakers, as Noy mentioned about construction as well, how can we make them care about these things? How can we make them care more? Kasi let's face it, we live in a in what they see in economic perspective na medyo ano pa, hindi pa masyadong nakalagpas sa poverty line. Merong mga ganong effect in terms of money gains, monetary value, ganyan. But if you go beyond it and if you just listen to what Noy just shared, ang taas ng ating value, right? As culture. It's so rich actually. So how can we make our community care more? Because I bet even our neighboring cities outside Davao or other cities in Luzon, outside Metro Manila, meron din silang precious genius loci nila. They also have their precious indigenous and unrealized culture that's valuable. So that's my question for you, Noy, and for the rest. Now, how can we make our community care more? Before I head on to Mandy, Hans, you're next. Let's take a look with what's happening with our Jamboard, no? I'm gonna share my screen kasi nalingaw ko when I saw the Jamboard. Wait, let me share it. There.
Wow, I didn't expect that, but it was really great, especially the drawing of the of the arch, the Chinatown arch.
Kaya di na ko ma-share.
Okay. Do you want me to
There.
share na lang?
I saw it
Okay.
there. Oh, so this is let's go back to the first page. So this was like the first page, and it's I don't know what to call this. Kasi I'm showing this kasi Mandy mentioned, di ba, kanina that one of her advocacies and in fact expertise is using art as a method of therapy, right, man? So again, in relation, we build and prepare for a better city in our creative lenses, in our artistic minds. Let's try and look at their sketches. Oh, gera. Tapos meron pang there are notes here. explaining the giant. Hi there. How do you use your leisure time? Politics, TikTok. Yun pala yun. Yeah, cats. Cats will be our heroes in if you want to survive this life. Anyway, I think that's a okay. I'm gonna be extending a bit. Maybe 1 minute for everybody to breathe, to relax, kasi that's been very heavy and fun, but heavy to digest. So, kung sinong wants to refill their drinks, go to the bathroom, yeah, 2 minutes. And at Sinans, maybe you can play our beautiful, prepared videos for airtime. And chika lang ha, while we are on a break, 2 minute break. Let's get back on track with Mandy. Are you ready, man?
I don't know what I should be ready about. I don't know the question that you're going to.
No, Mandy's born ready. Yan na lang masasabi ko sa inyo, friends. So anyway, here's the how I'd like you to connect your expertise on art therapy and our topic today, no? Kasi much of the people, right, that who will work on building, or maybe even they're just the attempt to build this sustainable and abundant and genuinely happy city in the future are our younger generation, even younger than I am, right? We are really gonna be relying, kung sabi nga ni Jose Rizal, ang pag-asa ng bayan ay ang kabataan. But the most one of the craziest, I'm sorry to say, problem and crisis that we have today, and it's craziest and most scary and terrorizing, is because we don't acknowledge that this is much of a problem. And I'm talking about mental health. No? It's not only for the kids. A lot of adults also experience mental health. It's just so we are also very stuck with the fear and the stigma against it. And using art as a means to find healing or therapeutic mental therapy through art, how do you think, Mans, can this practice not only better one person, but in turn, better a community, and maybe that can influence the character that we already have? No, kasi as I have mentioned during my introduction, that I think life is here is really the people. It's not just the Philippine eagle or the durian, it's really us. So the quality of life also depends on our mental health, our mental state. So give it away, man. How can you relate that, that practice, that intricate practice? And before maybe you start to answer the question, give us a little bit of a background of what is exactly art therapy is and how do you do it, and thank you. So go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Once again, okay. So disclaimer lang ha. Nana mentioned yet that I'm an expert in art therapy. I'm not yet at the level of, I don't think I can say I'm an expert in it yet, but I do practice. And then my long-term plan next 2023, I'll get my license from NZ, from New Zealand, because there's no licensing body here in the Philippines, which is sad because we're such an artistic community. Now, I'll just go back a little bit and try to tie up what Nana has asked me with the previous topic. That the question was, how do you put more value in culture? And because my background is art education, that's my MA, and I was so, when you're young, you're very idealistic that I want to change how we package art in the art school, how we teach them. I want to change the bahay kubo palayan, the sun that has a face lesson that we always have in. My goodness, I don't know why we still have that palayan and the bahay kubo thing that we require kids to draw, And then I asked my students, hey, can you draw me something? And then they draw me exactly that. So when you just imagine the limitation that we've already created in the minds of children as to what art is. Oh, I'm getting emotional. Okay, so going
We
back.
want that, Mandy. We want that.
Now, going back, art education and art therapy is actually tied together because children should already know. Well, they actually intuitively know that art is therapeutic. That's why, and if there are psychologists and psychiatrists here, they know the value of doodling. And I think that's why Mark Seng also had that, what's that, jamsomething.com. What was that? Jamboard. That it? Jamboard. So
That's right. That's right.
yeah, that one. And also Suni Brown, the author, also said that the doodle revolution is so important because it is a language that we should have nurtured from a young age, nurtured it and be able and allow it to grow. But unfortunately, because our educators are not equipped to maximize this language, kasi doodling is a language for kids to be able to process what's going on internally, what happened during their day. They're going to doodle and then they're going to show it to their parents, and then they'll have a very long story connected to it. That's basically what happens. So parents, I know you can relate, except if your child is a genius piano player, then music is the language. But the go-to really for us madlang people is the doodling. Now, imagine a child that is his language, and then you impose rules such as do not color beyond the lines. That language is impaired, and their ability to process what happened during the day, their emotions, what they saw in the TV, that's how they process it, is hampered. So how do they now express what they feel? Especially if they are in a home where communication is not very efficient. And thus, that problem is compounded over the years, resulting to emotionally inept adults. Wow, how sad. But really, if we were taught at a young age how to use art to be able to process our emotions, for example, I'll give you a concrete example, my example, because I cannot share my client's example. One time I had a huge fight with my dad. And some of you know my dad, so just don't share it with him. And it was catastrophic in my mind. I could not process anymore. I was frozen there because my father and my history represented a lot of issues there. I would not go into detail, but the thing that saved me was I was able to paint this really angry version of myself, shouting, and I had a blue mouth, my background was red, I was angry but still fabulous, of course. That is a requirement, to be fabulous all the time, despite the anger. And I still have that. I forgot, I should have brought it here, but it's huge. No, that was a huge painting. And after that, after that cathartic experience, I was no longer angry. I was now able to communicate to my father objectively. This is how I felt earlier. I was angry without losing my tooth. Okay? So imagine, and I know that other artists here know the potency, if we only equip our children that there is another way of expressing, a more productive way, rather than inoculating them with a teleserie that when you are mad, you throw dishes. Right?
Or you pull your sister's hair.
Oh yeah, or you pull your sister's hair, or you morph into a palenquera, or you plot some evil deeds. I don't know, Okay, now please humor me and try to imagine if we were able to teach our young that way, what kind of community would we have? In addition, I went to a couple of countries for my postgraduate. I went to Indonesia. They were colonized for 3 centuries, but culture there is really, really like, it's so thick, you can swim in it, or maybe you even float. Why? Because their culture, for them, they live it every single day. In New Zealand, their government was very good. They put a lot of laws to make the Maori culture an everyday part of life. And even little things, signages, the prayer of the children in school, the songs they perform are in Maori language. It's required that they do that. The dances, they have to do that. And the art, they were able to tie pop art with the Maori culture, and the art they produce is fabulous. Where else? Where else did I go? Wala na, nakalimutan ko. Anyway, so in those cities, that you will see that in Indonesia, even their folders, the pattern in their folders, in their ball pen, in their candy wrappers, are patterns that are found indigenously in their culture. Tayo, we are so immersed, and there is a disconnect. We could, aside from the education, we could package culture in a more modern way. Architecturally, yes, you can do that. In a more, can I highlight, more modern way? Diba, Mark, you agree? Okay? Can be in a very minimalist, clean way. It can be, I'm pretty sure us Filipinos can come up with that. We are very creative culture, creative people. It's just that again, it's not mandated by law that we include our culture even in the packaging of our products, because if we have to do that, our everyday things should be infused with cultural things,
Mandy,
you know,
can
so
I
that
interrupt a
it
bit?
becomes yes.
Because of that, very rich kasi yung very difficult and very hardcore kasi yung pinupunto mong our culture is not being packed in a modern way in our everyday lives, no? It's very rare for us. And going back to Noy, he said na if you really want to, experience the culture, you have to go a few hours drive pa, not in our daily lives in the city, right? So don't you think it's also because of how we are heavily influenced in the modern and Western media? That something that can you relate that to? Because we have a lot of teenagers watching right now, a lot of students who are in the creative industry. So
Yes, of course, that is one of the major factors. We are so, unlike China. China controls, I mean, it's amazing how China controls their internet, everything that they expose their people to. It's highly controlled by the government. And there's a boon and a bane in that. But again, I think there's a lot of boon in that. Look at how culturally strong they are, as opposed to us. It's like, kind of watered down or mixed with a lot of Western influences. And yes, again, some would say, because our Spanish colonizers, they destroyed our culture. Yes, okay, that's a factor. But again, what are we doing about it? That's the important question. What are we doing about it, and what can we do about it? Number one, maybe we can talk to our local government and say, maybe we can. If somebody says tradition is always contemporary, it is a continuous transformation. Correct. And I would like to have a active hand in that transformation.
that's Noy.
Yes, kasi we have to actively participate in the transformation. We can't just flow, because if we just flow, we're going to become Americans/Koreans.
Oy, no shade sa mga K-poppers, ha? We love K-pop din naman. Oh, we love K-drama din naman.
By how their government packages their
Di ba ang
K-pop.
K-pop
It's
grabe
true.
din.
Oh my God, it's true.
You should do that. Anong pangalan ng Pinoy pop?
Cringe man kasi, pero sige na lang. So, we'll have another talk for that lang, Mandy, ha? We have to really learn how to appropriately pack our culture in our everyday lives, because graphics design, is very involved. And you mentioned architecture. Again, I am an architect, and not only kasi architecture is placemaking. Yes, it's a tangible building, but it is also, and this is a lot of architects miss this, architecture is an experience.
Correct.
Architecture is a feeling at the same time. The most well-designed buildings are those that evoke emotions in how you navigate through the space. And why am I saying this? Because not only you can mimic the cultural architecture of our past or our indigenous roots, but you can also mimic how they did it, the craftsmanship, and how they, organize their spaces. It's very interesting to study how they organize their spaces. It's very rooted on the context of their place, not another bungalow that's designed for winter. Just, thank goodness. Anyway, sorry Mandy, naging emotional din ako. Nakakahawa ka kasi. So anyway, go back. Let's go back to art therapy and
one last thing about what Noy was discussing earlier about an active hand in the transformation of traditions and culture. I remember going to Samoa, which is like a dot in the globe, or sometimes it's not even there. It's so sad. But in the Pacific Ocean, but it is amazing how they were able to package their culture as a money-making industry and as something that evokes respect, because they have this cultural center where you go there, you experience, unlike ours, we're so secretive with our traditions. I know there's something that it's imbued with a lot of holy spiritual aspects to it, but perhaps those that are not very sensitive, we could actually allow our youth to experience that. And yes, the Magsaysay Park is a step towards it, but what I experienced there, you are really privy to say traditional tattooing of a woman who accomplished a feat in her life. We could watch it live, but we were just told, okay, you sit in this way, make sure your toes are not pointed to that lady, it's disrespectful, you be quiet, don't move around, things like that. And really, as visitors, as guests, you get that sense of, oh, okay, this is something important. This, we should respect this. This is their traditions. If we had that sana where we could just go there and really, be immersed in that instead of going to the boondocks, it's so hard to bring the children in the center of it all where everything is happening. Perhaps we can do something like that. Noy, that's your assignment. Good luck.
Nang pasa pa. So anyway, I really like what you said a while ago, Mans. No, I really love that you touched on culture as well, and I really think that the previous sharing was very strong. That you really build on it, right? But I really like when you mentioned that, just that question, that rhetoric. Na imagine if we don't confine our kids and allow them to express in how they should express through writing, through art, through whatever. Imagine the community, imagine how genuine the community will be, right? Because after all this, it all boils down to having a quality of self before we start building quality of life for our community. Balik na daw si Sir Vic, but I think he is watching via Facebook Live. Kasi he was supposed to talk about the community involvement in his city, our neighbor, Tagum City, who is also very strong in terms of really uplifting their artistic scene, both in music, literary, and visual arts. And ang from what he shared with me before our talk, he said that he really started by giving exposure opportunities for the youth. Na, okay, this is not yet a formal job for all of you. This is not even a formal training for you, but this is an exposure, for you to learn art and to be involved in building the community in the art scene. So I really love that. I really wanted him to build on that. Kasi it's already successful and trying in Tagum. And one of the key elements that it made that he was able to make it happen, kasi when he presented it to the local government unit of Tagum City, they they resonated with him Parang nakinig tapos they understood. There was resonance, and then there, Tagum is really thriving in the art scene. Sir Noy, you're raising your hand. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not in a position to speak in behalf of Victor, but I'll give you an introduction with this. Sayang baka ma-missed out.
Oo nga,
I
sir. Please, please.
I was able to witness the collaboration of Victor Dumaging with Datu, what his name na, Pasilua. He's a sculptor, but then later they produce a visual presentation of the tradition. So not from the end of an outsider, but they just help weave it properly to the extent that the output is balanced, is a well dialogue presentation of the IP. And he also collaborated with the students there. I think there are also out of school youth and young visual artists and even professionals to collaborate in presenting the history of not just the history, but also the contemporary, interaction of people in Tagum City.
Wow, thank you, sir. I really like that you mentioned na they focused on building this art community from the community. Wala yung mga, I'm not against in any way. I'm not against importation of artists, pero they started with their own. That's really good. Tama ba, sir? Tama ba akong pag
Yes,
na-capture ko ba?
because si Victor keep on posting on that, then we were all curious, even si Abraham Garcia Jr. na keep on discussing on this because he was able to, because there are art projects that there's no clear if it is collaboration or not. But this one from the start, the presentation of idea, there's no domination in the presentation of the artwork, but it was able to get the spirit of the culture of the artist himself, yung si Dato, yung IP sculptor,
Okay, sige.
their lifestyle. Then si Victor was able to facilitate it well na you can see the powerful texture and style of Sir Victor, but you cannot see that in the artwork. So ibig sabihin, well process yung sharing of ideas and even technique. So nakatulong, he was able to help in the visualization.
That's really good. And
I hope Victor will. Sorry,
I hope,
Vic.
Sir Vic, we give justice. So anyway, yes, I spoke with Professor Haji. Na I asked that she gives, the wrapping conclusion, and so we will get to that later. But I will ask her some of my questions now. Ready? Another woman born ready, just like Mandy and me. Anyway, yes, kindly unmute yourself.
Far away, Nana.
Far away. Okay, so yeah, my question for you now is, I think it's still related to my standing question for everybody. Now, how can we make other people care, or can we ba? And I am not in any way trying to enforce, and because I'm not a believer of shoving whatever belief, whatever, however good that is, on two people's throat. But so yeah, I wanted you to elaborate on that approach, no, by maybe starting, can you tell us, from a sociologist, from a psychologist, what is really the character of a city ba, from that perspective, like, and kasi I've been noticing that you've been agreeing and nodding from the sharing since Mikey, and I bet you have tons of precious notes there. Please share it with us, and leave something for the conclusion. But for this time, just your thoughts on what is this genius loci.
Yeah, siguro I'd like to locate our discussion from the standpoint of my discipline, because this is where I am coming from, no, and what we're talking actually in the last few hours is basically from our language, place identity. What animates us as a city? What animates us as a place? No, and it's basically just a potpourri of memories, constructs, ideas, and even experiences, and of course, related feelings about a particular place. And when we talk, for example, of Davao, we reference it not just with our experiences, but also we represent it with architecture, with physical spaces, and of course, of people. No, and that's precisely why we have a potpourri of a lot of ideas in this whole conversation. Someone is talking about the experiences and the importance, for example, of handling and using art for children, because we wish to connect our own experiences of the past, with our present, and even with the future, because that will constitute, of course, our whole experience of the city, of the Davao that we experience. And when we talk of culture, no, I'm having some sensing that we are locating culture something very foreign and alien. We breathe in culture, we breathe out culture in everyday life. No, in fact, that's why we want to disabuse also our understanding of the Davao culture as something which is to be defined, but it's something to be lived, it's celebrated, and to my mind, there is no one distinct character of Davao culture, but rather we say Davaoeño cultures, because most of us here, to tell you honestly, are migrants to Davao. Not like, take for example, from my experience, I'm already staying in Davao in the last 24 years. I'm from Jensan, and we also have a different character there, a city character there. But when I migrated to Davao, I embodied how it is to live as a Davaoeña. One perhaps maybe who may be very assertive to what I believe. Without essentializing it, but it's really a character, a city character, no?
Pero
And
hindi ka
also,
lagi ganito mag-istorya, sir. Hindi ka lagi ganyan mag-talk.
so this is precisely the Davao spirit that we wish to perhaps capture in this conversation. And what constitutes, for example, to my mind, the Davao spirit that we wish to articulate here is also the whole range of the works of the culturatis and the literatis that we have in Davao City, no? And also the works of the technocrat, the political and the economic technocrats who have contributed to the whole political and economic landscape that is Davao. So that spirit, to me, the Davao spirit to me is really pulsating. Yeah, it is pulsating, and we just cannot locate it in specific families in Davao City. We can also identify it as we can also identify the contribution, for example, of civil society, which is very, very much alive in Davao City. No, and this is the Davao that I know, and this is the Davao that I love. No, perhaps the spirit that animates everyone. No. In Davao. Siguro I just want to retort, give a very short retort to Mikey, no, about the Davao, for example, being devoid of colonial character. Yeah, and we're very proud of that. No, sometimes I had conversation with a priest that I know, no, because I always lament at the thought that we don't have a lot of rituals and old churches in Davao. But what actually struck me was their answer. No, and the answer was we may not have rituals, devotions in Davao City, but or in Mindanao for that matter, but we basically have communities. We build communities. We know each other. We have very strong social cohesion. No, and how do we spend, for example, our leisure? Because of the ban in liquor ban in Davao, and also the curfew in Davao, we basically spend it night warming with the families that we know, with the friends in friends' houses. That's basically a new type of and it has created some sort of a strong social cohesion in Davao, no? And I also like to say that the Davao spirit that we wish to capture here is not just something which is also identified with development and progress, but it's also identified with assertion, struggle, no, which was very much evident in the 1980s, 1970s during the martial law years, for example. And we have seen that there are still people who are very much identified and respected in the Davao civil society and they're always what we call perhaps key opinion leaders even in Davao, no, who still have a say to how we should live, no, Davao, no, and how we should, for example, engage, no, the governance, for example, in Davao. So this is not so. Perhaps to me, Davao is diverse. The Davao spirit that we want to identify or describe is not only diverse, but it's also evolving. It's also negotiated in everyday life by migrants, and of course the whole generations of the Lisadas. No, I went to the Jesuit archives, sir, in Ateneo de Manila, and I found the family name of the Lisadas who basically contributed vast tracts of land so that the Jesuits can basically have their missions in Davao. So this, no, we give premium to local history, no, which is also, which to me, I think we should support. And if we want to capture and perhaps celebrate even Davao, this Davao spirit, this genius LOCI, which we have been talking about in the last few hours, we need also to recognize the role of government here to create an enabling environment which fully supports initiatives like this, and the initiatives also of civil society, even the academe, no? And I'm very much happy with the work, for example, of Pamela Castrillo, who's actually Dr. Pamela who's also very much documenting, no, digitally the documents, no, documents and manuscripts which may actually vanish in the next few decades. And I think that's basically what we've been talking about in the last few hours here. How Davao spirit becomes now a pulsating myth. No, how the Davao spirit, which animates us in the academe, in civil society, in the political circles, in the religious circles, or in many layers of our everyday life.
Let me just start off with, I've been listening to everybody, and I'd like to do a different approach here. Like if you belong to an old family in Davao, there are certain quirks that most of us share. It's not intended. It just so happens that we were brought up that way. Okay. First is that we have this irrational fear of rain. Hindi ko alam kung bakit ganun yan. Yung parang, uy, umuulan, wag na tayong lumabas. That's one. Okay. Pangalawa, and they usually say this, it's like, madilim na, wag na tayong umalis. Okay, just the second one. It's rain, it's darkness. And the third one is, maybe you have experienced this, I've seen this, like if you go to Samal Island and then you go to the beach and then you have to come back to the mainland. Some people go home at 4, some people go home at 5. Most Davaoenos will go home at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And you know why the reason? The reason is kasi malalaki na ang waves. Okay, so parang, yeah, yung parang ganon. But siguro, the overwhelming trait that all of us have is that we were brought up in a very protective society, in a very protective environment, even to the point of being overprotective. And why is that? Siguro I cannot prove it to you. I cannot show a direct relation to you, but I guess it has something to do with our history. So I'd like to start there. Nikki, you mentioned about Davao and the lack of Spanish influence. You see, for us to understand Davao, you have to go to Cebu. Okay? If you believe Yoyoy Villame, March 16, 1521, okay, the massacre of Lapu-Lapu and all that, there was a lull between the years, and the Span. If you believe the historians, the Spanish came back to Cebu in 1565. Okay, and then 5 years later they went up to Manila. They turned left. They didn't turn right. They didn't go down. The recorded history of Davao will tell you that the Spanish influence, the heavy Spanish influence, came to Davao in 1848. Okay, so that is almost 3 centuries. That's about 270 years. That's why if you go to Cebu, like if you drive through the whole island, you will see a line of Catholic churches Kasi ang kanilang naandun kaagad eh. They were there eh. In fact, in sa Mindanao, that is a very rare thing. No? That the first inkling, so to speak, of coming to Davao was in about 1831. Now, what happens when you go to a place and then you don't know anybody? Okay, kung wala kang kilala, what do you do? Syempre, you look for people who are the leaders there, who are this, who are that. Yun ang hahanapin mo eh, kasi sila yung may alam eh.
Rock
So
leader.
in this case, when the Spanish came, they made a treaty with some people that considered themselves to be they called it loosely the Southern Association of Datus in Mindanao. Okay, and the Sultan of Davao, the Datu of Davao, was one of those persons. So they came over and they started trading and all those whatever they were doing, but it was not a heavy presence. In 1848, they made the treaty. So yung treaty na yun, they started, sige, yan, pumapasok na yung mga tao. In 1849, something happened. A Spanish ship came to Davao, but they were boarded. Okay, now I'm going to tell you something which might offend some people, but it is part of history. It is necessary because what we are now and what they were before are totally different personalities. Iba. So, but it has to be said in that context. Now, they were boarded by Muslims. Okay, and when they boarded, they were massacred. The Spanish crew, they were massacred. Only two survived because they were looking for water. They went back to Manila and they reported. Nung na-report sila, ang sabi nung Spanish government doon, tinawag yung tao, yung Sultan of Davao. Ang pagtawag sa kanya, sabi, oh, what happened here? Anong nangyari dito? Ganun. And then the Sultan of Davao feigned innocence. Sabi, hindi ko alam yan. And then he did something which opened the gateway to the colonization of Davao. He said to the Spanish government, do anything you want. Okay? Do anything you want. Come here, do anything you want. Okay, so one of the persons who heard that was a guy named Jose Uyangurin. Now, Uyangurin was a Spaniard who lived in Katiil. Okay, you know where Katiil is? It's somewhere up there north. Okay, in Katiil. He lived there in 1831, but he went back to Manila, and in 1849, he made the deal with the Spanish government. He said, I'll go to Davao, I'm going to bring some people with me, and then when we get there, I will open trade, but you give me 10 years of free trading. He was given 6. So he goes back to Katiil, and then he brings with him Spanish soldiers, and then he brought natives, Manobos, Bagobos, everybody. And this is where the first Davaoenos originated from. So they came to Davao. The first stop in Davao was Malipano Island. Okay? If you notice, if you're familiar with Davao, Malipano Island is part of the Pearl Farm Resort. That's where the executive villas are situated. No? Okay, so when they were there, if you have been to Malipano Island and you look across, it's Peña Plata, and in Peña Plata, right across were the Kalatagan Muslims. Okay, the leader of the Kalatagan Muslims was a certain guy named Datu Tapuan. So they had the talk, they had a conversation, and in their conversation, the Datu found out na, okay, I know what your intentions are, but you have to help me also. Because at that time, the occupants of Davao were basically dalawang klaseng tao, okay? The Muslims, which numbered to about 4,000 to 5,000, and then the Lumads, which were about 10,000 to 15,000. Okay, so sabi ni Dato, sige, tulungan kita, pero tulungan mo ako. Ang gagawin natin, we will try to settle this, but if we cannot settle this, then ang mangyayari. Okay, so The Spanish agreed. So they entered the Davao Gulf. Now, you have to remember, as you said a while ago, Mikey, like in Bangkerohan, you will notice that there is a heavy Muslim presence. That's not only now. That has been there for so many. That's been there for hundreds of years. Because if you look at the Bangkerohan River, if you go straight, kung titingnan mo, it spans out into the ocean. Correct? That's called the Bukana. Okay, and in the olden times, the Bukana and the trading area, that part of Boulevard, was where the Muslims resided. Doon sila nakatira. When the ship that was bringing Oyangoren was passing through, the Muslims did something. They fired their lantaka cannons. Of course, they did not hit the ship because ano lantaka cannon to a galleon, if you want to put it that way. But it was a very clear warning to everybody. It was a very clear sign to all riding in that ship. You are not welcome here. We don't want you here. But they continued. Okay. So, pagdating niya doon, when they made the turn, the first sign that they saw, the first image that they saw, the landfall that they saw was Santa Ana. Okay, now you have to remember this. Okay, Davao City before was a swamp. Okay, it was a swamp. Anywhere you go, it was murky, it was muddy, it was all of these things. And kung ikaw, you are somebody from Luzon, you are from an area which is civilized, and you see this swamp area, and you go, ano na mangyari dito? And dadagdagan mo pa by the fact that there were thousands of Lumads who were inhabiting the place, some of whom were headhunters. Okay, they were cannibals, they made human sacrifice, they did all of these things. So, what they did basically was, okay, they landed, they settled down, etc. But they felt safe because the Muslims were far away and they were protected by the swampy areas that surrounded them. But they were not so secure, and they wanted to do something about it. So anong nangyari was there was a battle that took place. It was Dato Bago and the Muslims against the settlers and the Spanish and the Kalatagan volunteers. Okay. What is interesting to note here is that when they were about to do battle, the Spanish settlers raised the statue of Saint Anne, and then they won the battle. Okay, so they believed that Santa Ana saved them, was the intercessor who made them win that battle. That is why if you are from Davao, you go to Santa Ana right now. What is the church that is in honor? What saint is in what? Ano honor ng excuse me? Who is the saint that is honored in that church? It is Saint Anne. It is Santa Ana. Okay, so they defeated the Muslims there, and then what did they do? When Oyangurin left, they all decided, as Nana said, they all stayed in the area in which the Muslims lived. It's called Ubos. Ubos Ubos means lowlands. Okay. Now, if you are familiar with Davao, you will also notice that in that area, bright kasi yung the Muslims were a very crafty people. So if you notice UIC in Bangkerahan, the UIC, it's on top of a hill, right? If you look at it, it's on top of a hill. That is where the fortress of the Muslims was situated, because that was where they ran to when there were other invaders who came in. Now, when the Muslims were defeated, they scattered all over the place. Now, most of the time, and then the settlers started to settle in that Ubos. Now, here's an interesting fact. Magallanes used to be a high place. Even now, it is still a high place. You try to go to Menseng. Okay, you try to go to Menseng Hotel. At the back of Menseng Hotel, you will find out that Menseng Hotel is medyo mataas, and then you go down, it's the river, correct? It's the river. But that used to be a higher ground. That used to be a higher ground. So gradually, what they did was after they settled in the river, which is a very interesting thing because uh, it was practical to stay near the river. Why? Because that's where you washed your clothes, that's where you fished, that's where you did basic things, no? Like siguro you poop or whatever, kung ano-ano pang ginagawa mo doon. So that's where it was. So that's where it was. And then that's where the controversy of the Davao name comes from. You see, because there are so many stories about the origin of the word Davao. But here's something to consider. I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying just take it into consideration. The Bagobo word for river is Dabu. Okay? The Bagobo word for river is Dabu. So, if you are from, kung taga Davao ka, that literally means you are somebody who lives by the river. Okay, so you're somebody who lives by the river. Now they stayed in the river for some time, but finally living doon sa river was quite a medyo mahirap na kasi the river lang. So what the next thing they did was they went up. They went up to Magallanes, and that's where the stories began. They started the four roads, as Nana mentioned, San Pedro, Bolton, Magallanes, and all of this, and started slowly, slower. In fact, you know, the first, if you can imagine it, the first cemetery in Davao was the corner between San Pedro and Ilustre. Okay, that was the first cemetery of Davao, San Pedro, corner Ilustre. Now, imagine this. It's the 1800s. No light. Okay? Kayo lang. Surrounding you are 10,000 Lumads and 4,000 Muslims. And you are only a few hundred settlers. How would you feel? One, wag na tayong lumabas kasi madilim na. Okay. Two, okay? Ang ulan, whatever. But that ulan, I'm still trying to figure it out. Bakit takot ang taga Davao sa ulan? Pangatlo, waves. I'll tell you a story about the waves. I'm not sure if there's a direct relation, but in the 1930s, when people from Samal came to Davao, they had to ride sailboats. Now, unlike today, now if you go to Samal or whatever, it will only take you 5 minutes. Diba? 5 minutes lang yan, diba? You ride an outrigger, a bangka, or a motorboat. 5 minutes, you're back. You're ready on the other side. In the 1930s, when students had to come and study here, it literally took them hours. And then at that time, there was a person who owned the biggest sailboat there. And they asked her, how long does it take for you to get to the island or go back? And the answer was this: depende sa balod. Depende sa waves. So, siguro, nadala ng mga tao, umuwi na tayo ha, kasi ang mga waves malalaki na, kung ano-ano, so etc. and so forth. And finally, if that is the kind of situation you're in, if that is the environment that you are in, you will talagang become overprotective. You will protect your family, you will protect your friends, you will protect the environment in which you are in. Why? Because it is literally thousands against hundreds. Now, as I was trying to, you know, ascertain and talk about all of these things, I was thinking about, okay, like my father, he wrote a book. If you want to know, he wrote a book. I will shamelessly tell you later. But you know, my father was someone who always, in fact, he ended his book this way. Sabi niya, I miss the days of old Davao. I miss the days of ganito, etc. and so forth and so on. Well, siguro those are the ramblings of an old person and all of these things, etc., and so forth and so on. But I think there's something deeper than that. There's something much more than that. And that is like, many years ago when the ASEAN Regional Summit was held in Davao, I was asked by then Ernie Abella to write an essay about Davao. So I wrote an essay, and the only thing that I could say is perhaps is the summary of all that I'm trying to say tonight. You see, Davao City, Davao is not a city. Davao is a village. Okay? Davao is not a city, it is a village. What does that mean? Everybody knows each other. And how do we spend time? We have so much time being together. You know, we do this, we do that, we go home for lunch, etc. Yung mga ganon. How is our art shown? Our art shown is this way, that way. Why? Because if you read a lot of Davao books, you will always see the pining, even the despair, even the despair. Na ano ba nangyari sa Davao ngayon? Dati sasakay ka ng eroplano, kilala mo lahat ng tao. Ngayon, wala ka nang kilala. Pupunta ka ng mall, wala ka nang kilala. Pupunta ka ng restaurant, wala ka nang kilala. What is that? What are all those signs of? It's a sign na, okay, I miss the old Davao where everybody knew each other. I miss the old Davao na ganito, etc. and so forth and so on. You see, but as I said, but we have to move on. We cannot just stay there the 1940s or the 1950s. And I always like try to bring it back to the it is not culture that makes people, no? It is people that makes culture. Like we create our own culture. Not it is, of course, culture is shaped by a lot of factors. For example, the physical landscape, like dati-dati bakit tayo nagkaganon? Dahil siguro like if you live in a cold climate, you will appreciate you'll have to wear warmer clothes, you'll have to walk slower, and etc. and so forth. No, but if you live in a by the coastline, then you need to learn how to fish, you need to learn how to swim, because it's part of the survival thing. But eventually, it will all boil down to that. No, and that is what I think Davao is. You know, it's an evolving, slow, and yet the pining, even the hope, perhaps even the desperation of the old people who say this, who say that, etc., and so forth and so on. Parang, what happened to it? No? Like, because they wanted dati dapat magkasama tayong lahat, magkakilala tayong lahat, and so forth and so on. And like as I said, they may be rantings of an old persons, of old people, and all of these things. But ganun siya, ganun. Let me end this short, long talk. Kasi parang lumabas na ako ng 10 minutes with this,
Okay lang, sir. We love
I
it.
I was actually starting to do a book about Davao City during the Japanese era, and I got to interview one Japanese person. Okay, Davao City was bombed on December 8, 1942. That is Immaculate Conception, and a lot of them, even my father, my uncles, were all at the San Pedro Church for the mass, because the bombing started about 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, around that, and they were bombing Santa Ana because those nandun yung mga ships ng mga Amerikano. And everybody was in a panic and everything was there. And four of the persons there were relatives. Kasi magkakilala sila lahat, magpipinsan sila. That's why we call each other primo, prima, mga ganon-ganon. Yung mga ganon-ganon. Four of them had one friend who was Japanese. Okay, and this Japanese person was in a school. So school siya. You know what the four of them did? They went to the school, they fetched their friend. Ang ginawa nila, they formed the square to protect their friend, and they put their Japanese friend in the middle of the square, protecting them. And then they walked the kid home. They walked their friend home. That to me is the epitome of what Davao is. No? Whether you are Japanese, whether you are Chinese, whether you are this, whether you are that, it is just that. It is that. It is a village where everybody knows each other, where everybody cares for each other, where everybody says, okay, I'll protect you, you protect me. There's so many stories about the Davao San Pedro fire, but I will not go into it anymore because if we do, we'll end up baka wala ng COVID, hindi pa ako tapos ng kwento. So parang what I'm saying only is that Davao is a village. Okay, it is a village, and if it is a village, then everybody should know each other. That everybody should care for each other, and all of those things. So I'll end there. Back to you, Nana.
Lakon ko, sir. Unsa man na, oy. So yeah, let me just recollect.
Hilak lang. Pag hilak lang.
Ilang jud ka na kay tama bitaw sir kay maski na kung mama anak pod kanang sa ulan na kay sa mandog pod anak pod sa kanang gabi na ba sir nga nag kanang gabi na kay mutaas mo pa ng tubig di sa Davao River mag ulan. So badapli na jud ka kay kami madto sa farm sa una ay sorry no I have to speak it. You have to go to the farm in that area sa diyan mismo sa Mandog. You have to pass through Riverside. So that is also one. And also, sir, the same in Tama, 1 o'clock.
Yes, correct.
I thought, sir, you'll tell us about there's a pick there. That you,
Actually, there's so many.
Culture.
Actually, there are many stories there. Like in Davao dati, like if you come home, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you will see thousands of bats going to Samal.
Wait, from Davao, sir, going to Samal?
Yes.
The thousands of bats?
Yes.
for food ata yan, no? Food.
Mm-hmm.
May yun.
Food. Wow, amazing.
Ano siya sila?
No, wala dyan. Sorry, Gyud. I mean, no, let me just, okay, I'll tell you why. A little bit, not as long as Rene's story, because I can never top that kind of level. But the reason why I really requested Megan, this was last minute request, na I really wanted this photo as my virtual background of San Pedro Church, not because of the church per se, but because I have this, I cannot find a better word for it. I have this obsession with San Pedro Street. And my love for San Pedro Street, just how it evolved from that one straight, long street to parallel that, became grids and then became a city. And then it was, it was urbanized and was inaugurated into a city in the 1980s, 18 something, sorry. The reason because is until now, I couldn't explain why. There is just something about that place. There is something about that place. And one, if from a urban designer and a architect's perspective, the population setting is very strategic. When you get to that point in front of, example, if I was standing there right now and this was my likod ko to, then I'm probably looking at the Sangguniang Panglusod, correct? Or a vantage point of a city hall. And that's the population. So city planning wise, it's very rich. Why? Because if you also go back to the template of how San Pedro Street was, there is also a little bit of pattern in what you see in Claveria, specifically in Uyangurin, that is our Magsaysay now. And if you go to older cities of Manila, you see a similar pattern. But this, however, San Pedro Street is very different. And Sir Rene mentioned about the February San Pedro Great Fire that was 1980 something, sir? Tama?
1960 something.
1960 something. I think there were two fires, but the other one was greater. See, I'm this obsessed with this street. And then ang funny, if you study it pa further, the old typologies or the old uses rather of these buildings, crazily today similar pa rin yung kanyang use. Of course, they are not activating the second, the third story of the buildings because they are dilapidated or very hard to maintain, etc., etc. But there are still bakeries here, drugstores here. There are still, it's still saksak sinagol. If you want to really study what mixed use community is, mixed use street is, this is it. and a lot more of our downtowns. It's now, if you look at it in a city planning identification, it is identified as a commercial district or commercial street. Red yan, crimson red yan sa planning. Pero kung andun ka, lalakarin mo, it's not purely just commercial. You see culture that's very rich there. It's very something, and it's not, it's like you feel it's dying. You feel that its heartbeat is fluctuating, pero you know that it is alive.
I'll tell you one story that might make you cry.
Go, we're all ears.
During World War II, the old St. Pedro Church was made into a stable for horses by the Japanese soldiers. So ginawa siyang parang stable ng mga Japanese soldiers. One night there was a person who he was a sentry, and then he saw somebody from Claveria driving a carriage. Okay, pagpasok niya doon sa carriage, sinita niya yung tao. Sabi niya, "Hey, yeah, whatever, because I cannot speak Japanese." Sinita niya yung tao. Tapos, when the guy turned towards San Pedro Street, biglang nawala. He just disappeared. So, the guy, the Japanese entry was, saan napunta yun? Then the following day, he asked the priest, saan napunta yung tao? Ganun. So he described it, and then he pointed to San Pedro, under the statue of San Pedro, and he said, "That's the person I saw last night." Sige. So if you want to believe that, then sige, go.
One of the things that really concluded as how he described Davao that I got really struck me was, one, a city is not defined by its culture. The people will define its culture. And it's true. Okay, and that will lead me to my parting question to you, to the speakers, and even to our audience. Let's go back a bit. Our identity, the identity that the city is strongly promoting is Davao. Life is here. How do you define that? How in a very short statement, how do you encapsulate that based on your own expertise, your stories, your personal experiences? Mikey experiencing Davao, wanting to go back, but in Manila right now. Mandy been through around the world, very diverse exposure. Haji, not literally from Davao, but chose to be in Davao just like me. Noy, Batang Mandog, right? And Rene here, of course. No more intro for him. He's a legend, and we're very lucky to have him. So that's my final question. But before I turn it over to you, I would really like to highlight what Rene said, that Davao is, after all, started as a village. And I think my greatest realization, since we've been talking about building a sustainable Davao, building a progressive Davao, building a genuinely happy place, maybe we should really go back to being a village, not in an, unprogressive or caveman's way, but that portion, that story that he highlighted about us caring for one another and watching for each other. I think that's really something. And I think we still have it. Kasi, sorry to mention this, but if you look at our political psychology as Davaoenos, they're also very protective. For better or for worse, we are also very protective with our own beliefs as Davaoenos. So I think we can, dissect it, find the good in it, and apply in other things. So yeah, I'm gonna give you now the floor to please kindly answer my parting question. Davao life is here. How do you define it? How do you encapsulate it? Let's start with, again, Mikey, then we go with Noy, and then Mandy, and then Haji, and then Rene, lastly. Go.
Yeah. So first of all, I found the presentation of the speakers really, really touching, very enriching. So I'm raring to go back to the places na kinikwento niya Sir Rene. That would put the place into a new light. And I think, Sir Rene, sana may walking tours ka. Pagtas ng COVID.
I agree. I agree.
That is something special, sir.
Agree.
First, yung question naman ni Nana, first reaction ko would be is, first, never dream to be like Manila, like sa comments ko. Never dream to be like any other city in the world, nor even sa Makati. Yung life in Davao, exactly what it is that you've shared about Bangkerohan, about San Pedro, that is Davao. And any attempts to sanitize or to make the city become something else would be a disservice for the life Davao. I think tama nga si Sir Rene, sa Davao kasi parang sobrang tight-knit in a sense that yung activities niya is very experiential, like yung night market, yung bangkeruhan. And viewing it back here in contrast to Manila, that's something that we lost along the way. You go to Makati, you go to BGC, you do not get that. The social life is different, way different. So I think when you describe what is city life in Davao is precisely those places. And all I have to do now, from someone from Metro Manila, all I have to do is watch at those streets, watch how people interact. Lalo na sa Chinatown, I find it very interesting as well. Marami pang stores doon as yet to be uncovered kasi usually yung main street lang yung nadadaanan. But I heard some stories, there are good restaurants doon nakatago somewhere. But yeah, life for Davao for me, in this perspective ng taga Metro Manila is precisely community. Seeing people interact, eat sa streets, then spending time with friends kasi after work walang traffic pero have enough time for family. So that's great. Dito impossible, you have to choose ano ba, family ba, friends. So I think that's Davao for me, my perspective. Yeah.
Thank you, Mikey. Okay. Pernay, go ahead.
Listen, it's a difficult question. Though, right now I am my recent painting for the Mindanao Arts entitled "Locating Myself in Mindanao." Uh, I'm from Davao, but I moved three different places. So, Catalunan Grande, and now I am in Mandog City. Then now I'm sa Davao del Norte. And it's true, tama yung sinabi ni Sir Rene that until now, even though progressive you are, the importance of the family. Okay, my wife is in Ilongga, grabe ang clan, no? But on the other hand, the help is there all the time. The yan lang, and life, you know how hard and difficult life is. There are times of the season kung tag-ulan or tag-init, bagyo, abundance of food, abundance of sharing. So, and there's always a space for cooking, eating, because not just Davao, but Mindanao is abundant in terms of the coconut. All of the dishes, I think the coconut is present. No? So, dapat hindi lang siguro durian lang, no? Life is here with the coconut also. Anyway, sorry I cannot imagine more, but right now I'm still recalling and reflecting and discerning also of what life is here. No?
Don't worry, Sir Noy, because that only goes to show now we will have this talk more and more and more conversations like this. This will continue. As I have told, I think Mandy, my forecast is after this talk, after this event, after this roundtable, we will be crafting different topics from all in each of you inspired. So anyway, let's move on to Mandy. Mandy, the question, your final thoughts, and my question, how would you define your own feelings and experience of what Davao life is here? You're muted.
Sorry. Right. I think I'll just encapsulate it in two sentences. I would define Davao now as a place in search of itself. And it's like a youth asking to be nurtured by the old. Because of that search, that we have. And I'd like to echo, which I echoed earlier to Haji, how she reminded us that our culture is alive, it's pulsating, it's evolving, it's in a constant state of metamorphosis. So if we could only, find it in our history and define ourselves eventually by taking active roles in the formation, that would be heaven. Oh, back to you.
You know, Mandy, maybe now I know why I chose Davao. Because I eat existential crisis for breakfast. And knowing now from you realizing that Davao City is having an existential crisis as well and an identity crisis, oh, maybe that's why. Kidding. That's a beautiful way to encapsulate it. Anyway, let's move on to Haji. Davao life is here. How would you
I
define
think
it?
from the vantage point of a migrant to Davao, um, my I think my I can relate to the statement to the slogan Davao life is here because well, Davao is really rich, not just culturally but also economically, and therefore it provides um, wider opportunities even for migrants like us to have a place also in Davao. Um, Davao to me is a very inclusive space, a very inclusive community, um, one which is also very rich in not only in history but also really in with the people that you meet, no, and you form meaningful relationships. That's why the life that the relationship that you form here constitute already your life that you cannot just give up, not in spite of the opportunities offered to you by other cities. There.
Thank you. Ano ba yan? I'm getting so emotional. Anyway, Serene, I think you already answered it from the sharing earlier, but again, how would you encapsulate, Davao life is here?
When I was preparing for this talk, I was going through my outline and I was thinking, what can I say? Parang ganun. But there was something that stuck in my mind, and that was the image that I had all throughout this evening, and that was uh, I wanted to find out, like, kung ako yung isang tao doon sa ship na yon na magdadock sa Santa Ana, tapos ang kaharap ko puro swamp, puro ganito, puro kadiliman, puro ganito, etc. and so forth. Ano kaya ang feeling ko? How would I feel? It could be a combination of hope, but fear, despair, confusion, regret, strength, or whatever. And then I remember one quote kasi we were talking about art and everything. And I remember one quote by Picasso. I'm not sure if this is the right quote, but I think it is the right quote. I hope it is the right quote. He said, everything that you imagine is real. Everything that you imagine is real. So when they sat there and when they're looking at all of these things, I imagine this, but it is also real. It's right in front of me. And what I do with that is really up to me. And that, to me, is the spirit of, that's the spirit of Davao. I go into this wilderness of sorts. Like, we all have all sorts of wilderness. Like right now, our wilderness is COVID, our wilderness is this, our wilderness is that. But like our pioneers, like the people who came before us, they went into the highlands. So I'll end there before mapaiyak na naman, Nana.
No, the word that stuck on me while listening to you was resiliency. I think resiliency, when I say resiliency, it reminds me of that. Often kasi when we talk about the Filipino spirit, the Filipino hope, we equate it to the Filipino resiliency, no? But it has become over time, it has become very toxic because of that resiliency mentality. We don't solve problems anymore kasi resilient naman tayo eh. We just, 'di ba? But hearing this from Sir Rene and putting his shoes and imagining how must it felt like kung ikaw yung, ikaw yung nasa ship, tapos nakita mo wilder. And I think that's who we are, and that is the very essence also of Design Davao Society. Always finding hope, creating hope to whatever. And now we will be thinking na okay, hindi pala modernity itong ating kailangang tahakin, kundi going back to being a village. Very interesting. I love it. So anyway, it's already almost 10. We exceeded an hour literally, and I'm still gonna be inviting a little bit more and ask for a little bit of your precious time for my speakers to stay with us mga 5 to 10 minutes for our usual end talk, post-event evaluation privately, no? But before I do that, I would like to ask Haji to give us a few parting words, and as my assignment for her na to wrap things up, and past, present, future from how the talk went.
Siguro because I do not want to keep everyone late here, no, for for bed. Siguro just 5 points. No? Actually, pwede namang 3, pero 5, non-negotiable. Siguro I think yung challenge natin here is that the challenge is really how do we celebrate, no, this genius loci that we have been talking about, and then because the invitation is really to engage in what we call collective introspection, no? Ano yung ating kultura, ating kasaysayan, and the importance, of course, of historicalization, no? And because we no longer have these we don't usually publish. We have very limited publications about our local history. We only hear it from the Rene Lezada, no? And I think it's very important that he passes these on to us through published works, no, so that we can share it to the next generations. And siguro how I framed my synthesis is that this genius loci, which is basically our place identity, no, has its cradles, no, May duyan. And ang duyan na yan ay nandyan sa ating kasaysayan, which was articulated very eloquently by Rene, no, in our local history, no, in our memories. That's why retelling is important, no. In public architectures, no, we've seen, no, the San Pedro, and of course you have the church, Santa Ana, and of course the spaces that you can find, and also in people, no, our literati, our culturati, and even the families here, the old families here, who can well narrate to us the Davao that we know. But siguro what struck me, no, is really this genius loci is actually within the cradle of our aspirations and our fragilities and our fears, no, our representations of how we should live, no, as Davaoenos. And this is basically our metaphor of a village, but not just a village, an intimate village who knows each other and who cares for each other. And with that, good evening to everyone.